Hey, you guys. Welcome to Hanging with Langan. Got my bells. I'm all ready to go. Bats in my belfry. Maureen Langan here. You're watching Hanging with Langan. And this is my little chat show where I chat with everyone from academics to alcoholics, because why leave anyone out? And fun, heart, smart. That's what we try to bring to you. I couple the journalistic background that I have with the comic and try to bring you a show that is has wisdom and wit. That's the goal. So I'm excited because in a moment I am going to be chatting with a woman named Valerie Lapin Ganley, who directed and produced a documentary called Shalom Ireland. Yes, Shalom Ireland, about the history of Jews in Ireland. So I'm very fascinated with that. I'm going to give you more details in a moment. If you're watching this, would you please, well, if you're not watching it, how would you know? But if you're watching this, share it. Just share this. Just let people know, hey, start a watch party. This way, this is how we grow the numbers and the audience. And that's what we do. And if you can't watch all of it, Patreon, Maureen Langan, Patreon, Patreon is where you can see all the videos of the shows if you miss any of them here. So what I want to tell you is my mother is from Ireland, not Jewish. She, though, I have Irish citizenship. I love that. So here's the deal. I've been in Ireland many times, and I've discovered this place called the Irish Jewish Museum. And I went with my cousin Andrew, who's one of the funniest human beings on the planet. And we arrived there on a Friday, pardon me, and the sun was going down. So they won't let us in because it's the Sabbath. And Andrew says, Momo, we come back when the sun's in the sky. Just such an Irish way of putting things. So I'm going to start with a clip here. It's such a great conversation. And there is a fella, long gone to God, named Robert Briscoe. And he was, my understanding, a gun runner for the IRA. And he was he was a Lord Mayor of Dublin, which is a ceremonial role, more like an ambassador is how I see it. And he was the first Jewish Lord Mayor of Dublin. And here is his son, Joe, who also went to God a few years ago, but was in the film Shalom Ireland, talking about what it means to be an Irish Jew. Here we go.
My father used to say that Jews had the facility of picking up the best qualities of the wider community in which they lived. For instance, the German Jews were inclined to be a bit arrogant. The British Jews were inclined to be a bit pompous. The American Jews were inclined to be a bit boastful. And he said the Irish Jews were the friendliest Jews in the world. They also, unfortunately, drank more than any other Jews.
So there you have it. That is the opening of the trailer of Shalom Ireland, about the history of Jews in Ireland. A little stereotype there about the drinking, but I'm going to play also with the boastful, arrogant American ones. So anyway, joining me now, the producer, the director of Shalom Ireland, Valerie Lapin Ganley. Woo!
Great to see you.
We're already getting comments, and people say, hey, Mo, I'm here. You need to go to StreamYard.com/Facebook so that we can see your name associated with your comments. We don't want to miss a word that you have to share with us. Simple, StreamYard.com/Facebook. Valerie, thanks for being with me, darling.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. It's so great to see you, Maureen. And thank you a lot during this pandemic, and been kind of inspired to see how you've pivoted.
Ivanka Trump told me I had to pivot.
Oh,
she said pivot
in a different way.
Whatever she tells me. She said, Maureen, pivot. And I said, yes. No. I've had you on my talk show when I was on KGO in San Francisco. And I'm just always amazed by the work you do and how down to earth you are and what you've been able to accomplish. So when I came across Shalom Ireland, there's so many stereotypes about, I don't like St. Patrick's Day as a whole, because I don't like the green beer, people getting drunk and beating each other up. And that becomes a stereotype of the Irish. And it makes me so insane when there's such a rich history of writing and the culture and the language. And then to come across knowing that there was this pretty large, relatively speaking, Orthodox Jewish community in Dublin in the land of pork. Let's talk about the start of the Irish Jewish community, particularly in Dublin and in Ireland in general.
Oh, well, the history of Jews first coming to Ireland dates back to 1,000 years, but
Does?
Yeah,
Are
there's.
you lying?
What? No, I'm not.
Really? There were Neanderthal Jews? Like, what was happening?
Well, it was documented in the annals of Inishfallen. You know, the priests would keep these records that a boat came sailing from across the ocean with Jews bearing gifts, and it says that they were turned away, and that's kind of left up to interpretation what that meant. Were they sent away, or they just went back to where they came from?
They were probably turned away. That tends to be a Jewish theme.
Yeah. But then the largest, then some Jews came during the like 1700s. There were some traders from Holland, but the biggest influx of Jews came from Eastern Europe during the pogroms. Many Jews came from Lithuania, where my great-grandparents came from, and established communities around the country.
The time frame, the time frame of the pogroms were what, the late 1800s?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, so okay. We'll get to your family in a moment. So they settled in Dublin predominantly. I know there was a Belfast.
Yeah, there were communities in Belfast, Derry, Waterford, Limerick, Cork, and there were lords mayors in different cities too, not just in Dublin. So the Briscoes were the first in Dublin, but there was a lord mayor in Belfast who was Jewish, one in Cork.
Really?
Yeah.
I wonder what Jewish person is, in Vilnius, whatever the capital of Lithuania is, and says, you know what? It sucks here. Things are tough. Let's go to a place where people haven't eaten since 1865 and things will be better. Let's go to the land of pork, which is against our religious ways. Like, what part of them says Ireland's the place?
Well, what part says any place is the place, right? The people are looking for opportunity. They're escaping from persecution. And interesting enough, so many people had left Ireland at that time. So I think Ireland, it was actually in a place where they needed people, right? So there was opportunities. I mean, it's all relative, right? Where you're coming from, where you're going, where you're looking for something for a better life, right? That's what immigration's all about.
I know. Plus, there were a lot of apartments available if everybody was leaving. That's being a bit of a wise ass. So you found, here's a photo here, the Irish Jewish Museum. That's the sign. And if you are in Dublin, this is what it looks like. It's a former home. Well, I'll let Valerie tell you. Where's the Irish Jewish Museum? And
yeah, it's in an area called it's the Jewish community there, South Circular Road. And it was literally two houses put together. And I'm not sure what the origin of the museum was. A synagogue at one time. I'm sure Maureen, you went upstairs and saw that it's a beautiful sanctuary, where they had services at one time. And that was very common, right? If you didn't have an established building or synagogue, people would worship in their homes. And that's still happening today. In Cork, there's been a little bit of a resurgence there. For a while, the community sort of disappeared, but now there's an influx. There's this woman there her name's Ruti Lax, and she's a klezmer musician and a playwright, and she's kind of revitalizing the community there, and they're worshiping in people's homes. And that's what my great-grandparents were doing. When I found the address where they actually married, it was in a home, right? And then later, as the communities grew and they raised money, and then they built these beautiful synagogues, like the one that we have featured in Shalom Ireland, the Adelaide Road Synagogue. It's just a beautiful building. But yeah, that was very common. You sort of do it in people's homes, right?
Well,
assuming about that building there.
Do you know what the name of that area in Dublin is called in particular?
The little
that section of Ireland where the Jews were.
Little Jerusalem, is that right? Sorry.
Molly McCluskey Barber, she's saying, is that why there might be a tiny amount of Ashkenazi Jewish in my ancestry DNA? Absolutely, Molly. Absolutely. But Molly, I need you to go look up what the neighborhood in Dublin is where the Irish Jewish Museum is located. Could you Google that for me? And my cousin from Northern Ireland, Katharina Cunningham, is watching. Woo! So you did not know that your grandparents were Irish, or you did?
No, I didn't. I grew up in a Jewish family in Los Angeles, and I didn't know anything about my Irish background. When I met my husband, Michael, a staunch Irish American, I was so impressed with his pride in Irish culture. I kind of envied it. I wish I had that. But so the first time I went to Ireland, we went together, and he actually found the Irish Jewish Museum in a guidebook. And so we were just curious, like, what is this theme? What would be the blending of our two cultures, you know? So we're kind of amused and curious, and we phoned up because, you know, they're only open a few hours a week. Right? It's all volunteer run. And sure enough, these women said, come on over, drove over, and we got there, and these two ladies were standing outside, and they looked like my Jewish grandmothers. And I had these memories of my grandmothers walking down Fairfax Boulevard. If you've ever been to Los Angeles, the heart of the Jewish community, you feel like you're in New York or Israel when you're there. But they look like my grandmothers. They dressed like them. Their body types were similar, but when they spoke, they had these lovely Irish lisps. But it was it mixed with Yiddish, and it was like very surreal. I'm like kind of doing a double take the whole time. Where am I? What is this about? So they took us around the museum and had so much pride, and I was really fascinated, especially with the Briscoe story, with Robert Briscoe having been a patriot, fighting with.
I want to get into him in a moment, if you don't mind, Valerie. And if you're watching this, you're listening. Valerie Lapin Ganley, producer director of Shalom Ireland, about the history of Jewish people, the Jewish communities in Ireland. Here we were talking about the Irish Jewish Museum in Dublin, and here's a little clip I have from that. Now, you're going to see the Jewish man who runs the museum, or is a docent? You really can call them in a place that's like 3 foot by 5 foot. There's
a lot packed into that little museum, though.
It's mind-boggling how much is in this little place. It's mind-boggling how much is in there. And some of it's very funny, from stuff like the Guinness beer, kosher in Hebrew lettering. That is hysterical. But there's also some very deep things about Jewish children being there for a short time during World War II and then being sent back. A lot of heartbreaking stuff. There was a Catholic woman a nun giving the tour when I was there, because she felt she had to do a penance in general for what the Irish, predominantly Catholics, did to not help the Jews, even though they were a neutral country. So here's a little clip, though. You can't hear the Irish guy they're both Irish, but the non-Jewish Irish guy, he's asking if what happens if you are a lapsed Jew. So here you go. Take a listen.
You may notice the table there, which symbolizes a Friday night table celebrated by most Orthodox Jewish households. The lady of the house, the wife, usually says a blessing over the candlesticks.
Do you find that those customs are still very much held to?
Of course they are.
The question, what I mean is that obviously there's a lot of lapsed Jews.
A Jew can never lapse. A Jew is a Jew, no matter whatever he lapses. Right. We have a phrase in Hebrew which says, Chaverim kol Yisrael. That's Hebrew, which says, no matter where you are, a Jew is a brother to another Jew. And that's been literally the way of the Jewish people over the centuries.
I love how he says that. A Jew is a brother to another Jew wherever you are, you know? So, Valerie, let's talk more about this, the museum. And then you were bringing up a fellow who I read a lot about, Robert Briscoe. Yes, the ceremonial position of a Lord Mayor of Dublin, but so much more. His history prior to that, I understand, I read his book, his memoir, that he was a gun runner for the IRA. Talk to me about that, because he's one of the most famous Irish Jews of Ireland.
Well, Robert Briscoe is the son of Lithuanian immigrants, but he was a staunch patriot. Am I on? Yeah, I'm not muted.
You're on. You're here all week.
So yeah, as a young man, he joined the cause. You know, he ran guns and ammunition with Michael Collins during the War of Independence. And then after Ireland won her freedom, he was elected to the Dáil, the parliament, and served in that position for decades. And then during that time, he actually also became the Lord Mayor of Dublin. They had this thing where you could be a member of parliament and also on the equivalent of the city council, the mayor. But during another thing that was really fascinating about him is during the World War II, he went to Europe and bought these old clapped out ships and smuggled Jews out of Europe into Palestine to save them from the Holocaust. This was illegal, smuggling these people at that time. But he was doing this as a member of the Dáil, a member of the parliament.
What I found really interesting, Robert Briscoe, his story is so interesting. I got the book. It was out of print. He wrote it in 1957. So I went on a Libris. They can get out of print books. And I paid $20. It came from God knows where. And it had his signature in it.
You know, the same thing happened to me. It was such a surprise, buying a used book online like that. And it had his signature in it too. Yeah.
Maybe we're being scammed.
For real.
Maybe we're both being scammed. But what I liked about what Robert Briscoe had to say is they said, which were you first, Jewish or Irish? And he said, but I'm both. How could I separate one from the other? That's who I am. And that was, he also had that Irish sensibility that I know so well, because my family's all from Ireland, of kind of playing, dismissing big things. Oh, don't fuss. Like my mother had a heart attack recently. Why do they have to make it such a big deal? Little incident. So, he's writing about these incredible things he did, about being chased by the British because they're on to him, being a gun runner. Oh, we go through this house now and we just disappear at the backyard. Oh, we're no better for the wear. Worse for the wear. You're like, what? He just got killed. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, I think there are a few things to comment about that. I think the Irish, and you'd appreciate this being a comedian, their wit is very self-deprecating. And I think that comes from being occupied for so long, right? And anyone who got kind of full of themselves, you shoot them right down. We call it slagging, right? Which is done in a lighthearted, fun way. But it's like, don't get too full of yourself, right?
Oh, God.
The other thing I think, after talking with David, his grandson, who you met,
Robert Briscoe's grandson, David, is now a doctor, a pediatric head of something at Harvard. Robert Briscoe's grandson. Yeah.
In talking with him, I think that Robert wasn't exposing all the secrets, in that book, right? He wasn't going to expose, obviously this book was written after the war, but, if you were in the IRA, you wouldn't be telling how you did it, right? So I think that there's some of that in the book too.
Important to know, yes, the IRA. He was part of the Irish Republican Army, a freedom fighter before Ireland became the 26 free counties. Just was because he could speak German, he was able to go to Germany and finagle, as they say, and make things happen. I just found it interesting too. I brought this up before, and it's not just particular to Robert Briscoe, but any of the Orthodox community in Ireland at that time, which, thank you, Molly, called the Portobello area. Yes, around South Circular Road, Valerie, which is where it
is actually referred to as Little Jerusalem still.
Little Jerusalem.
In an affectionate way by non-Jews too.
But I think about Orthodox Jews coming to literally the land of pork. I mean, it's literally, you know what I mean? It's just so funny to me, but they created their own kosher stores and restaurants.
And they still, predominantly the community is Orthodox, not all, but they abide by those strict traditions and import a lot of food that's kosher from other places.
Do you know what were at the height, how many numbers of Jewish people were in Ireland?
All told, not even 6,000. But we Irish Jews punch above our weight. I mean, it's not just in politics, but in the arts and the medical professions, lawyers, everything. People contributed in so many ways and still do.
What do you think was contributed by the Jewish community to Ireland?
Well, as I just told, just the Briscoe story, right? Serving in politics and being part of the fight for freedom. But there's also a very interesting figure by the name of Isaac Herzog, was the first chief rabbi of Ireland, and later became the first chief rabbi of Israel. He was very close with Eamon de Valera, the prime minister, the Taoiseach. De Valera sought out his counsel in weighty issues of the day. They even had a part of the Irish Constitution recognizes religious minorities, including Judaism, Quakers. What else was in there? But Rabbi Herzog was part of drafting that. So in the arts, you see so many today, artists and filmmakers, everything. Really.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about a Jewish man, but because he was Irish too, fighting alongside Michael Collins, working with Eamon de Valera, the longest serving prime minister or president in Europe, I believe, like 50 years or something like that. I mean, just such a long time. And you just think about the times, because this was before the Irish freedom. I just find the whole thing so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And having such a love of his country and a love of Israel, just to have both of those things within yourself.
Well, I asked the same question when I first met people about what's it like to be an Irish Jew, and people look at me, and after a while I stopped asking that question because it was ridiculous. It's sort of like someone saying to me, what is it like to be an American Jew? I mean, I don't dissect that. That's just who I am, right? I'm both. I don't choose one or the other. And so I realized after a while, because people just look at me like, what do you mean? They didn't even know how to answer that question. It's,
Oh, yeah, you answered it like Briscoe did. But you know what, too, though, Valerie? And I mean, I don't know if I've asked you that specifically, but you have become an expert on it because of this movie and what you've done. Because I think people don't expect it. And it's such a conversation piece. Really, it is. And it's a way to open up a dialogue about Jews are everywhere and everyone. And I love that.
Well, and I also want to comment on what you said about the stereotypes at the beginning, because, actually Michael felt kind of uncomfortable with that stereotype about Joe saying that the Irish Jews drink more than anyone else. And actually, that's what I like about that. It sort of turns stereotypes on their head. And in all my work, I look at those things like, how do you really, what are stereotypes? Well, negative ones, right? Sometimes stereotypes can be good, but where do they come from, and how do we break those down? Because that's how do we get to eradicating hate? And that's about getting to know each other, right? And I feel so fortunate, like not having grown up with this culture. I used to say that I adopted it, but now I actually feel like I'm Irish, right? And that's because of a lot of research that was done since the making of the film. I actually have found that my family was pretty well established in Ireland.
Really?
Yeah.
So I'm going to take a break, just a quick little, this is my little commercial break, Valerie, and then we're going to get back. This is my high-tech commercial break. Bear with. Hear ye. Hanging with Langan brings all of my shows to you for free because I'm all about love. Why wouldn't I do this for you? But if you're inclined, to support the show, we always say pay what you can or what you want. Nothing too big, nothing too small. And you can do that simply at paypal.me or Venmo at Mo Langan, paypal.me/Mo Langan, and Venmo at Mo Langan. If you are also inclined, this would be wonderful. If you wanted to subscribe on Patreon, patreon.com/Maureen Langan, I bring you gifts. I come bearing gifts. You can get at different levels. You can get the Don't Make Me Hate You t-shirt right over my shoulder. You can get all the video chats because we put all the audio on all the major podcast platforms, but you get all the audio. I put backstage chats and bonus chats. And we can do so many cool things, wine parties. There's so many things that we can do. And that starts at $5 a month. And then you're supporting the show and great guests that I bring to you because that's what I do. There's interviews up there with Alan Zweibel, the original Saturday Night Live writer, Jessica Kirsten, Vic DiPotetto, great comics. Just so many good stuff that you could get there. And also I recently interviewed Christine. Well, her name is Sandra Joseph, and she played Christine in Phantom of the Opera for 10 years on Broadway, the longest running leading lady in the longest running play show on Broadway. So if you're so inclined, again, it's Patreon, Mo Langan, and Venmo, Mo Langan, and PayPal. So Thank you, guys. Hear ye, hear ye. What I'm going to do is get back to Valerie Lapin, my guest, here to talk about the Irish Jewish community in Dublin and beyond in Ireland. And I'm going to replay a little clip that started it off because some of you didn't get right in. That's Robert Briscoe, who we were speaking of, the Lord Mayor of Dublin, a gun runner. He did it all. People having their weddings in Ireland, the Jewish community. Look at this. Dublin Hebrew Congregation, Irish Jewish Museum. Look at all these cool photos. And of course, kosher Guinness. Who doesn't want that? Or just in Hebrew. I don't know if it's kosher. What do I know? Oi, what do I know from kosher? I think I'm more Jewish than most people because I'm from New York City. So I always say I'm Jewish. That's right. Little Jerusalem is what that area was called. And that's what Valerie said. All right, we're going to play this little clip from Shalom Ireland. It's part of the trailer. And this is the famous Robert Briscoe's son, Joe, talking about his father coming from, his grandfather coming from Lithuania, his grandparents settling in Dublin and giving birth to this chap and so many others.
My father used to say that Jews had the facility of picking up the best qualities of the wider community in which they lived. For instance, the German Jews were inclined to be a bit arrogant. The British Jews were inclined to be a bit pompous. The American Jews were inclined to be a bit boastful. And he said the Irish Jews were the friendliest Jews in the world. They also, unfortunately, drank more than any other Jews.
Valerie, I had wanted to replay that, the stereotypes, the Irish Jews. I just got a message here, Valerie. Herbert Wolftone, Herb Briscoe, is watching, nephew of Robert.
Oh, nice. Hello. Welcome.
Oh, where are you, Herbert? We'd love to know where you are. Just put it in the comments. Where do you live? I want to know everything. So, Valerie, your grandparents, you found out, unbeknownst to you, how did you know? Were they your great-grandparents?
Yeah, so, as I was saying, we went to visit the Irish Jewish Museum. A few months after I got home, my dad called one day and said, we have a cousin who's a genealogist, and she has discovered that my great-grandparents, my dad's grandparents, were married in Waterford. And she sent over a few documents, and I was like, are you kidding me? My dad didn't believe it at first. And so I wrote to the Irish Jewish Museum, and one morning I get a call from Joe Morrison, who you just met, the docent, the volunteer docent. He said he was from Limerick. His mother was from Limerick. And her name was Lapin, just like mine. And he had an uncle who lived in Waterford around the same time that my family did. We never figured out exactly what the connection was, but Joe and I decided we were cousins. And, if any of the Morrison's family is on today, hello, shout out.
Shout out to Rebecca, daughter of Joe Morrison.
Oh, good. Rebecca's on. Hi, Rebecca. Rebecca has a very short cameo in the film.
Is Rebecca coming to us from Ireland?
Rebecca, you're in Israel now, I think, right?
Same thing.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is so insane. We're going to get back to your story. A gal I went to high school with, Mary Gartner. I love Mary. We went to high school together. That's her uncle Herb. From my friend from Lake Hiawatha. There's no lake in Lake Hiawatha. That's her uncle. This is all coming together, you guys. Maureen Langan and Valerie are bringing together all the Irish, all the Jews from across the fruited plain and internationally. All right. So you don't know you have these great-grandparents who are Irish, who live in Waterford, who are doing pretty darn well for themselves. Good for them. What were they doing? What was their life like there in Waterford?
Well, they had a shop where they sold furniture and draperies, and which was pretty common for Jews to do around that time.
Really?
A lot of Jewish people would do what they call peddle around the countryside. They take their wares around and sell them. My great-grandparents were actually pretty well established in social circles in Waterford. I'm looking at some notes because this is some research that came about in recent years. You'll remember, Maureen, when we were at the Irish Arts and Writers Festival when we first met. There was
That's where I first met you, when I was performing at the Irish Writers Festival.
Yeah, and I was there because I had been contacted by a man named Kieran Cronin from the Waterford Institute of Technology. They were in the process of bringing over an exhibition called Representations of Jews in Irish Literature. And some scholars in Ireland had done extensive, deep research into this. And they took this dog and pony show on the road, and they created some museum panels to go with this research. Kieran contacted me because they were bringing it to the Waterford Institute of Technology, and he wanted to include a local angle and wanted to tell the story of my family. So turns out Kieran is a very talented researcher, knows a lot about genealogy research, and he dove in and found out all sorts of things about my family that I didn't know. You'll appreciate this. I'm going to read this part because I want to get this right. On the occasion of the royal visit to Ireland in 1885, my great uncle, William, wrote a letter to the editor of the local newspaper demanding a retraction because his name had been included in a list of Waterford citizens testifying their loyalty to their Royal Highnesses, the Prince and Princess of Wales, on this visit they were making to Ireland, right? And so he demanded a retraction because he had not agreed to that. So it appears that there were some rebels in my family.
I love it. Well, they're Irish and rebels tend to go together, don't they?
Right. But you know, there were Jews on all ends of the spectrum when it came to.
Of course. And to speak out, write a letter, and be that prominent, and make a show of yourself.
In fact, Robert Briscoe's father-in-law was a loyalist, right? So they had some conflicts around that, right? So yeah, I mean, it was like in Civil War, right? Brothers are sometimes on the opposite side. So
I know that is heartbreaking. I understand that Robert Briscoe's sister became a nun.
Yeah,
that's interesting, isn't it? Well, when in Rome.
But you know, I feel like people marry people from different faiths. People become different faiths. People embrace different faiths. You know, it's all just about isn't religion about teaching you how to love, right? And we just do it in different ways. Isn't that what it should be about?
It's a really lovely way to put it. That's really a lovely way to put it, Nellie. Gosh, there's so much. So you discover your grandparents, they're doing well. You discover this Irish community, and there's so many things I want to talk to you about this. Talk to me about we've got only touched a little bit about the Belfast area, and Amy Rychek, she's watching.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Amy. And again, I went to high school with her brother, and she lives out in San Francisco. This is so insane how everybody's coming together on this show. I love it. So many cool comments. White people are saying, I'm trying to listen. I guess one person, I think they got in. I don't know why there was an issue for a couple people. Talk to me about the rabbis and the connection again to Ireland, and then why they left and went to Israel, like that whole story. I don't know that rabbi well. I mean, I know of him, of course, but I don't know much about Rabbi Herzog. I know
Rabbi Herzog, yeah. Well, I mean, he was a renowned scholar of the Talmud. Yeah. He was very well respected internationally as a rabbi. So it was quite an honor to be asked to become the chief rabbi of Palestine and later Israel. So, you know, it's sort of like, how do you pass up that opportunity, right? But interestingly, his son Chaim became president of Israel, right? So there's quite a big Irish Jewish community in Israel. I met quite a few folks when I was there showing the film.
Really?
We had a great time. It was a great hooey. Yeah. The Irish ambassador brought cases of the good stuff, the good Irish whiskey that we had at this film screening. It was a lot of fun. And there were some musicians playing Irish music there in Jerusalem. It was wonderful. Yeah.
I love the sessions when people just get together with their instruments and put together a little bit of a hoolie. What did you find? Well, you're talking about being in Israel and finding a large Irish contingent. So you mean now they're Jewish? They've been born and raised in Israel, but they came from an Irish background. Similar.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You know, people wanted to make Aliyah and, you know, go to Israel, live in Israel, be part of the creation of that country. So yeah, there's a pretty big Irish community in Israel.
What are some of the things?
Rebecca, if we could get Rebecca on.
Where
Joe's daughter, she's living in Israel now.
I would love to see if we could get. I don't, this. I do my own technology here. I'm like Silicon Valley on my own, just chucked to the wolves in this crazy pandemic. I have pivoted. I'm just looking at some of the comments. Rebecca is there, and Herb and Mary. I feel like the romper room lady, my friend Molly here. I see Amy.
I was on romper room. That's my claim to fame. I grew up in Hollywood. I was on romper room. Sorry, but I digress.
Well, no, but my friend Molly was the romper room lady in New York and New Jersey.
Oh, really?
Yes. There's a lot. It's all coming together. My friend Robert Miller is watching too. I had a Seder. Was it called a Seder? I believe at his house. When the sun goes down, you eat a nice meal, right? That's a Seder. It doesn't have to be just a special holiday. You have one on a Friday.
It's for Passover.
Oh, and what did I have with the meal with the candle?
You had a Shabbat meal.
I had a Shabbat meal.
Yeah.
So I had a Shabbat meal at my friend Robert Miller and Sarah Lee Kessler's home. And before I left, I used the restroom, washed my hands, and then I shut off the lights, thinking I was being polite, shutting off the lights, but they can't put them back on because they're modern Orthodox and the lights have to stay off.
So they couldn't sleep the whole next day.
Yeah, it's my fault. I'm sorry. What surprised you? Because when I was at the museum, the Irish Jewish Museum, my friends, when I was there, and some of it, of course, it's so fun to see the little details that you didn't know about the Guinness beer that's in Hebrew. But some of the things just struck me so painfully about the children escaping World War II. And they were given a bit of a respite, I understand. They were allowed to come to Ireland. I'm just picking a number, say 6 months. But then they were going to be sent back once they weren't supposedly in danger anymore. I read something about that.
Well, some of them actually came to America. So it was a humanitarian effort. And I think that the people who were part of that look back on that fondly. They started a farm in Northern Ireland. They were on a farm. So yeah, there were some efforts. Briscoe worked very hard to try to bring more Jewish people to Ireland, but just Ireland was reeling, right? This was shortly after they'd won independence, right? There was a lot of poverty, migration away from Ireland. So I'm not saying this is an excuse, but it's just like Ireland, no country was taking in Jews except for like Cuba, I think, and the Dominican Republic, or China. China took in a fair number of Jews, but America has a disgraceful record on that. Roosevelt was turning Jews away during the Holocaust, right? So I don't think that it was an issue of anti-Semitism per se, but I don't know, maybe the audience will correct me.
So you think it was economic, but it always is, and then we always turn people away.
De Valera has gotten a lot of criticism for not taking in more Jews. Ireland was neutral during the war, so as a small country, didn't really have a military or much of a navy, right?
Right.
And it was in a very sensitive, strategic place in the world, right? Having said that, the Americans were landing there and using, it was kind of like a lot of wink, wink, nod, nod, when I'm sorry, I'm not articulating this very well.
You are. I'm getting you.
But it still is kind of a controversial issue to this day. What country did do
right by the Jews?
Right by it, right? Are we doing right by people in Yemen today, or other parts of the world, Syria?
South America,
Mexico, Central America, right?
Central America. You were talking earlier, Valerie, about the depiction of Jewish people in Irish literature.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the overall portrayal?
I'm not much of an expert on this. Is another show. You should have some of these scholars on. Apparently, like the character of vampires were based on negative stereotypes. That was one that I remember from that. Of course, there's Shylock and Shakespeare. That's not Irish, but
well, let's pretend it is.
yeah. But apparently, the vampires came from who's the one that Dracula? Bram is the author.
Stoker.
Sorry, don't know my horror story.
I don't know horror stories, but I'm going to move on to another couple topics. But there you go, folks. That's Robert Briscoe, who was the Lord Mayor of Dublin, gun runner, just a little bit of a gun runner, IRA, freedom fighter. That's it. A few little things like that. His father set up a furniture store, and I understand some meat stores, and he was quite the entrepreneur, but out of necessity in Dublin. And I hope you guys get to go to the Irish Jewish Museum at some point, or just even Google it and research it. I think you'll be fascinated by what's in there. And I just think it's so cool to go upstairs there if you ever can and see the synagogue that they have there where they would pray. It's just, I remember the clock. There's something interesting about the clock that was up there. I'll have to sort that out. But go there if you can. It's such a worthwhile place, and definitely do some research on that. You brought up something, Valerie, that really interested me. I want to go back to that. Abraham Bram Stoker was an Irish author, best known today for his 1897 Gothic horror novel, Dracula. Thank you, Mr. Papito. I love when people weigh in, you guys. It's so much fun to get your comments and anything you know. Like, this is for you, this show. We all connect. And again, you want to support the show. They're all for free, but if you want to pay what you can or want to, any amount, it just keeps the show going at PayPal and Venmo at Mo Langan. And if you want to subscribe, starting at $5 a month, to patreon.com, and at different levels, I'll get you a Don't Make Me Hate You t-shirt that's over my shoulder, because you don't want to hate people. They make you hate them. You are a victim. Valerie, you brought up being in Israel. I'm going back to this again. What I want you to know about is, you're giving a shout out. You want to know about representations of Jews in Irish literature. If there's anyone,
you can Google that and you can find more information about the work. This work is still ongoing. There's going to be a book published about it soon, but yeah, some good stuff.
Can you and I please go? Can you and I just please, can we go to work on a documentary together in Europe? I'm a very good researcher. I was a journalist for many years. I'll go do comedy gigs around Europe at night. I have the passport, the Irish passport. And then you'll say, Maureen, go research this topic for me. And I'll be like, yeah, I'll help you. I got detail. I'm good at that. Like, that's my thing. That's my jam.
Well, coincidentally, the project I'm working on right now is very early stages, but it will most likely bring us to Europe, not Ireland, but Berlin and Budapest. How about Berlin and Budapest? I think you'd go over great in Berlin with your stand-up. Have you ever?
Sorry, I have not been there, though. I did meet a club owner who owns a club in Berlin when I was in Switzerland doing a gig. This sounds so uppity, but it's just fun. At least, see, that's the Irish thing. This sounds so uppity. Don't brag. My mother always said, don't make a show of yourself. And what do I do for a living? I make shows of myself. No, but I would go for pennies on the dollar to research stuff for you. I swear.
Well, Maureen, I do need your help on this, because there's a little bit of comedic element that we'll have to talk about. I need your help in sussing this part of the story out.
I know. And you're probably thinking, can I afford Maureen? Is this too much? Is she serious? I don't know if she is, and she will make this work for you. You know what it is? I so miss that side of my brain. I love being funny. I love humor. I love wit. But I also love the other side. I love the balance of both the digging and I've been doing tons of genealogy. Tons of it. I love it. Well, it's a puzzle, because every time you find another piece, I found out my one uncle, my father's uncle, came here and he thought, see, this is what people do from other countries. And this is so American. And I want to talk about this. They come from other countries. And my great uncle Jack came from Ireland, from County Westmeath, and served in the Spanish-American War.
Really?
Then he went on to serve in World War I. He was he had a career in the Army, and I just put up a headstone to him out in Queens, because there was no headstone to him. And with women, and this isn't just this is everywhere, you'll see the woman's first name, but you don't know her last name. You know nothing about her. So then I had to research his wife. I had to know more about her. Rose McGuire from County Cavan. I found out her father's James, her mother's Catherine Donahue. I mean, but so that's one. The other brother who stayed there, and we're talking the early 1900s. He, and I didn't know anything about this, and I'm going to probably say this wrong and embarrass myself, but he was a private with the Connaught Rangers. It's an Irish, Connaught. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly. The Connaught Rangers, which was part of the British military.
Well, when was that? What?
The early 1900s.
Right. Well, that's what, Ireland was part of Britain then.
Of course.
Right? Same with my great uncle. Fought in World War I in the British Army and was killed in France. And there's actually a memorial to him in Waterford as one of the sons that died during World War I. This is some of the research that Karen turned up. But Maureen, I think we may be related. Did you see me perk up when you said Westmeath? Because my husband's family is from Westmeath. I mean, it's not a big place.
Where are they from in Westmeath?
Drumrainey, and I was there like 5 years ago.
Well, my family is from Rath. We'll have to connect with your husband. And where's he from? I'm going to look that up.
Westmeath.
Yeah,
Drumrainey. How do you spell that? Drumraney, I think.
I'll look that up.
I have this right here on the wall.
If you have a question for Valerie or a comment, you can do that. Just comment here.
Here's the map.
Yeah,
you can't. There's reflection, but
well,
I can look up where your people are from. Wow, yeah. I think we're related.
Wouldn't that be something? Well, okay. Well, I have two stories to tell you because, well, I want to tell you about that one in Pittsburgh, and then I want to tell you when I hear in recent years that people should only come to America merit-based, what they can bring to this country. I think about, well, people come here out of necessity. And I think about my father's parents came here, and my grandfather had a 6th grade education. This is all according to the census and I knew my grandfather, and his mother had an 8th grade education. And then my father gets a civil service job working for the sanitation department, the union. That was considered really great. And then my siblings and I went to state colleges, affordable. Now my siblings' kids are going to, University, Northeastern and Temple and University of Pittsburgh and Seton Hall. So like you come, my grandfather was a longshoreman, like people work like animals. So the next generation, so this merit-based, none of us would be here if it was only merit-based.
Right. And that's really what makes America great, right? That we all have that in our backgrounds, right? Our families came with nothing because they were escaping from the hunger, famine, persecution, wars. When you have to leave a country, during those kinds of circumstances, you don't have much on your back, right? So you come here and you imagine showing up, you're not here, you don't know the language. Of course, you're going to end up in these jobs where that are considered menial. But I also want to make the point, Maureen, when you talk about your family in Ireland not having education, Irish people, there's a very, very strong tradition of education and scholarship in Ireland, whether people are have formal education or not. I mean, when you walk into a pub, you talk to anyone from any walk of life and they're knowledgeable. I'm always impressed with that because I think they have a better education system there than we do here, frankly. But there was a time when if you were Catholic in Ireland, you weren't allowed to have an education, right? There were the hedge, am I saying this wrong? The hedge schools where people would actually have schools out in fields in secret because it was illegal to speak Irish, right? So I think that we kind of can assume people weren't educated, but you have to kind of peel back the onions to really look at that, right?
I know, yes, I hear what you're saying. It is a very smart, literary, sharp people. But I also think too, and I can only go by my own family, my mother's family was more educated than my father's family, more schooled, just the way it was. But my mother's family, owned land. They owned their own farm. Now, no matter how much you struggled, if you owned your own land, that was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And they got educated. And I go far back, and they're all educated. And they owned a quarry. They weren't rich, but they had comfort. My mother's one of 10 kids, and her father died when she was 15. So I'm not saying they were living large, but they had the animals on the farm. They had the growth. My grandfather's family were tenant farmers. They had 1 acre of land. And if the potato famine, 1 acre of land, and you're poor, very poor. So I don't know what was available to them versus what was available to my mother's family in terms of education. It's just very different sides of the family. But I find it also interesting. I did a gig, people are coming at us now in a good way with...
They call that on something? Did I say something wrong?
No, they're talking about books, depictions of Jews in Ireland.
Oh, yes, of course, Ulysses. Yeah.
And we'll do more of that chat another time. No, I agree with you. And in that area in particular, I spent a lot of time in Scotland, and I work with these texts that are 21, 22. What they know and what they read and what the references are mind-boggling to me.
You know, I think it's funny. You get on Facebook those memories that come up this morning, and I thought of you, Maureen, because 1 year ago today, I put a picture of the garbage cans out on the road. You know, the pandemic had just started, and I made little care packages. I put chocolates in there for the garbage collectors, because I remember at that time they were really putting themselves in danger. We didn't really understand how the virus was spreading, and so. When I think of your dad, being a garbage man and the essential work that people provide and have provided to keep us going through this pandemic.
Thank you, Valerie. Also, too, folks, think about this, because my father was a sanitation worker. You know, you see them working in your neighborhood. Bring out a bottle of water for them in the summer. Bring out some. Like these guys are out, and gals, I mean, mostly men, out on the streets. Offer them a bottle of water, for God's sakes, in July and August or whatever. I mean, I just think my parents do that. They'll see the fellas out there. Here's some water. A genealogy thing I wanted to bring up to you. My fella, we call him the Sicilian because his grandparents are from Sicily. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, Valerie.
Yes, you did. I know. I love this.
Story. So this is for the masses. I did we did the Ancestry.com, and the pie chart comes back, and I think it's an example. Mine comes back 100% Irish in the Midlands. We didn't even visit Galway or Dublin. But his comes back, and he's half Jewish. Half. His mother is a full Jew. And I go, your mother didn't tell you she was Jewish? He goes, no. Like, no. He was just like, what? And I said, don't worry, you had me at Shalom. Don't worry. The thing is, I did the research, and his great-grandparents left Romania and Russia, settled in Pittsburgh. I get in the 1880s. I get a copy of the 1910 census. They're still living there. And their next-door neighbor, are you ready for this? I have it. It's right on the census. At 610 lives his family. At 608, Langan.
No way.
Double dog swear. Double dog swear. And now, of course, I have to research these Langans, so I get their information.
Related to them? Have you figured out you're related to them?
I don't think we are, but Langan isn't such a common name, so we'll figure this all out. I got back to they came from Waterford, and the interesting thing, this is what I want people to understand. So I find out, what did this man do who came from Waterford in the 1860s? He was, and I thought I was misreading it, a puddler. And I'm like, a peddler? Like, who goes to rural Pennsylvania outside of Pittsburgh to peddle their wares? What do you got? Like, a bit for the cow? Like, what are you selling? I go, well, that makes no sense that he would be a peddler. It looks like puddler. I look up puddler. I didn't know that was a trade. Have you ever heard of a puddler? You probably have. I did.
Yeah, I hear you, peddler, but I think I have heard of that before. Yeah.
Well, a puddler, and I'm putting it in Maureen's rudimentary terms, they take one kind of metal and they turn it into another by putting it in the fire. You know how Pennsylvania became steel capital? They take some iron, and once you make it hot, it becomes another kind of metal. I studied English. I don't know what that is.
But is that what the travelers do in Ireland?
The tinkers, they would fix your pots and pans. They would come to the farm, my mother said, and they'd fix your pots and pans.
Yeah.
But this was different. They're in a heated flame infested area with this metal. And their average age was 40, life expectancy, because of all the soot and smoke. And I thought, how the hell bad is your life in Ireland that you come here and that's your job? That's a better life. Pretty insane.
Well,
now, Valerie,
they came right after the famine then, right? So
Right.
they were starving. Or as we say, the Great Hunger now, right? There really wasn't famine. The food was being exported to England. There was food in Ireland.
that's what a lot of people don't understand. There was food. They just took it from them. And that's why when I hear people go, well, you should come to this country legally, apply and wait to get your paperwork that says yes. I'm like, and I've heard Irish people say this. Well, we came legally. Well, okay, then the quotas were so much higher, or there were none at times.
Well, it's arbitrary what's legal. It's whatever law you pass at the moment, right? It depends on who's in office, right?
Well, prior to the last administration, we allocated 110 slots for, give me you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor, you're huddled masses. Now I understand it's under 10,000. And this had nothing to do with the virus. This was pre-virus.
Right.
I said to somebody, okay, so you're in a famine, you're trudging along in your bare thread clothing with your kids. And you're like, okay, let me fill out a little telegram and say, anybody got space for me in the Lower East Side? You brought this up before, and I do want to go back to it before I let you go. I know I've held you longer than I said. I just am amazed, like when you went to Israel and met people of Irish descent, Irish Jews now living in Israel, what did they have a lot of that same kind of music and culture, or was it vastly different?
Well, a lot of the people I had met had recently, been there for a few decades, but they grew up and were raised in Ireland, so they spoke like they were Irish, right?
Well, in Ireland, but I mean in Israel.
Yeah, I mean in Israel. Yeah, yeah. They would. Many of the people I met were born in Ireland and in Israel. So yes, they had Irish accents when they spoke English.
Oh, okay. I thought they were future generation. I got you. So there's
some of that too, but I met quite a few people who were born in Ireland, in Israel.
Did you see like Irish pubs and traditional music?
Yeah, I mean they love the Guinness. I mean that's why kosher Guinness was made, was for export to Israel, right? You don't.
It was. Here you go, a bottle of the. Look at this, you guys. Here's the bottle. But listen, you have been so wonderful to spend this kind of time with me, and I want people to know that they can follow you at. Oh no, you're back, Sarah. We're back. We are she said you're so knowledgeable, and that was from Sarah, and she's very happy that you were here.
My childhood friend.
My childhood friend. So your production company, Share.Productions, is where people can learn more about you.
Yeah.
And I would like you to give a quick shout out to your other film, which is fascinating. Long Ride Home.
Long Ride, yeah. The Long Ride, again, another story of immigration. It's about
Is it The Long Ride or The Long Ride Home?
The Long Ride. But that's an honest mistake because I used the music from Michael Frontian's Spearhead in the open, and that song is called Long Ride Home. So easy mistake to make. Yeah, it's about the birth of the new civil rights movement for immigrant workers here in the U.S. So, yeah, I have a trend here of immigration stories.
Another great flick that Maureen Langan watched and interviewed Valerie on KGO, my former radio station, where the program director never listened to my show and had no idea that I had a background in journalism. It doesn't matter. There's no bitterness. So thank you, my cousin Kathy Cunningham. Very positive program. Going to look up loads of links about you. You guys, thank you for watching, because when I have people like Valerie on, I try to bring you the best guests possible who have something to offer. We have a good time. We chat. We relax. And one more shout out, if I may, shameless Maureen Langan plugs, but we'll take your comments. You don't have to go away just yet. Please go to Patreon and support the show. Get a Hanging with Langan t-shirt. There's a lot of fun stuff there, and you keep the shows coming, and you can join as simply at $5 a month. Or you say, Maureen, I just want to make a one-time donation. I think about you and I love you so much. Sure, PayPal or Venmo at Mo Langan. I give you these shows for free, but also pay what you can, and that keeps them going. Valerie, Mary Gartner, thank you for watching. She says, Valerie and Maureen, she really enjoyed the show. Joy Diamond is bitter with me. An enlightened discussion. So good. People really enjoyed this. And you guys, I'm going to put you in the green room, Valerie, and say a proper goodbye and see when I'm meeting you in Berlin. And next week, we're going to chat more. I think I'm going to see if I can get Professor Peter Bales to join me. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, but I'll line up. I always line up great guests for you. So until we meet again, and follow me on all the .coms. Follow me here, Hanging with Langan, and the Facebook and the Instagram, and of course at Patreon. All right, talk to you soon. Bye, Wig. Mwah.